Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. So welcome to another podcast with Harvesting Wisdom. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. And today I'm not going to try the name because I think I screwed it up every single time.
No worries.
Paelea.
Paele.
Paele. Okay, I got to learn the pronunciation of the vowels. It's actually pretty simple. I've done it before, but
Similar to
I forgot.
Spanish or Japanese.
Yeah.
Your vowels are A, E, I, O, U instead of A, E, I, O, U.
Okay, very similar. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, and we're here in Lahaina in an aftermath, 2 years after a massive fire, I think August of 23, if I'm not mistaken. And what we're really talking about is community resilience, right? But I want to ask you a little questions about who are you, where are you from, how did you get involved with this and why, And so let me know a little of that, your background a little.
Yeah, so my name is Paele Kiakona. I'm born and raised in Lahaina. My family has been here. I mean, in my grandmother's home, which burned in the fire. We're in that home for about 7 or 8 generations.
Wow. Okay.
But I can literally have it mapped out, my genealogy, to the very first people who set foot here.
Wow.
When they discovered Hawaii. So, we have very deep ties to this place.
Mm-hmm. And so your family must have done everything, right? Everything conceivable, agriculture, fishing, and furniture making, whatever.
Yeah, I grew up, so right down the road from where we're at now is where I grew up at my grandmother's home. And we did everything you can think of. Lived completely sustainable with very little need of outside intervention or resources. We farm kalo, taro, fishermen. My family's a big fishing family. But yeah, we are definitely very embedded into the fabric of what makes Lahaina, or even just Hawaii, what it is today.
And place is so critically important to keeping any kind of heritage or any kind of culture, right? But in our world now with the urbanization, we've in an industrial world where everything is commercialized and it's a mercantile world, a lot of things get lost. And one of the things we do at Urban Farming Education is we're helping people regrow using organic methods so they can grow food. And it's a little sad because I'll work with people all over the planet who had thousands of years of experience, and now the new generation doesn't know anything. And the industrial method is really not work. It's feeding people, but not nutritiously, and it's not a sustainable practice. So that's what we do. That's what one of the things we help people with is just connecting back to what they've done. But so you were were you here during the actual fire itself?
Yeah. I was on island. So a little bit of my background before you get into that, just so you can kind of get a understanding of like why I do what I do. So as most people in America are not taught the true history of how Hawaii became a state.
Right.
Most people don't understand that we had a fully functioning Hawaiian government.
Right.
We were the most literate nation on the planet at one point in time. We were a culture that embraced the new technology, but not to the point where we let the technology change who we are and how we operate. The King Kaua sent people out to all over the planet during his reign to see what's out there. What are these opportunities? And not to bring it back to change Hawaii, but to bring it back to better our people and create more opportunity for our place. But, when wealthy businessmen saw the potential for Hawaii to produce wealth and revenue, especially during around this time was uh, the Civil War. So a lot of the sugar production in America was shut down due to the Civil War.
So it's moved over here.
So they saw Hawaii as a perfect opportunity to grow and farm sugarcane to now send it to the West Coast to supply the West Coast with sugar because they weren't getting what they needed. And at this time is when these wealthy business owners, they were like Dole, Pineapple, and Alexander and Baldwin. They're like the big five, we call them here, who still actually own a lot of our lands today. They organized a coup with the United States military illegally and overthrew our kingdom. They held our queen at gunpoint, had cannons outside of her home.
It's part of kind of an entire period of time of colonization, right? Yeah. And we saw it in Africa. We've seen it all over the planet.
It was happening everywhere.
Where whoever had the military or was more destructive could come in and just take instead of, being part of something. They just took.
Yeah, and that was the pattern of colonialization, not just from America, from all
it was worldwide.
First world countries on the planet. But unfortunately, due to that has left us where we're at today. All of the mentality of this place is just to create revenue and wealth, and it was never about the wealth of the knowledge of the people of this place.
What we call wisdom.
Yes, and now that we're looking into the future of what Lahaina will look like, a lot of the solutions to the problems that left us where we're at were things that our ancestors were already doing
200 years ago.
And comprehended 200 years ago.
Right.
And they were doing this for 1,000 years. So I grew up with this mentality of like, wow. I mean, we looked at America as the devil.
Sure.
For lack of a better word, because of how we were treated, our lands were stolen, our people were beaten. They made it illegal.
I'm not going to say it was a form of terrorism, but if I were, that might not be inaccurate, would it be?
I believe if any other country tried to do something like that today, it would cause some kind of war someplace.
Well, we're still seeing wars, and it's still being tried. That's the unfortunately, the human condition is peoples all over the planet have committed great atrocities, right? So, but so now you're trying to rebuild, but you're saying, hey, wait a second, let's not rebuild in that model that wasn't working to begin with.
Exactly, and that's where we're hitting a lot of roadblocks and places where we're butting heads on the ideologies of how we're going to build back our town. Right. And this is, one of the many reasons why I wanted to make sure that I was educated. I went to school. I graduated with environmental science degree.
So did I.
I tried to go into law school so I could come back home and fight for my people because I grew up with this mentality and all of this happening. Then, came the fire. And the day of the fire was crazy. We do have, it's called the Kaua wind. So Kaua is a valley that's right here in Lahaina. And every 100 years or so, every generation or so, it's well documented and it's passed down generation upon generation called Kaua winds. And it's a legendary wind that would come through and just with winds so fierce that it would flatten every tree in the town, it would flatten every structure in the town.
And any spark turns into a blowtorch.
Yes. But prior to this occasion of us having these Kaua winds, Lahaina still had its forests, its dryland forest. It still was a place that was wet. We were once called the Venice of the Pacific because we had vast waterways that went throughout Lahaina town. Now you go down there, it's all covered and paved over and filled in.
Right.
So when these Kaua winds came this time around, we've already the environmental degradation was so vast and exponential to the point where it was the perfect conditions on that day.
Yeah.
So the fire didn't start on August 8th of 2023. So fire started when our lands were stolen.
Right.
Our forests were completely wiped out to make room for sugarcane.
Right.
And then our water started to be diverted. And most people don't understand this, that something that we're taught in school, right? Evolution.
Right.
Things throughout time
take thousands of years.
Yes, evolve within the environment that is surrounding them. So if you do something that drastic and just cut off a huge source of water which flows into the ocean.
Bad
People
things are
think
going
that's
to
a
happen.
people think that's a waste, but for one, the rivers are our superchargers of the aquifers.
Hmm.
The trees that exist in Lahaina are all dryland forest trees. With these trees, they tend to send a tap root down into the water table, which they draw the water from, because there
Mhm.
wasn't a whole lot of surface water and surface rain. So now that we've diverted the water, these aquifers start to shrink. Say the aquifer was maybe 20 feet from the surface, right? That's where the moisture started. Now it's way down. It's pretty much to the point where it's gone, and most of our rivers
No
are
roots can
operating
fit it.
at like 30 or 40% capacity.
Mm.
And all of these things accumulate over time, right? If we have more of a rainforest, it draws the cloud line further down, which, because of the evaporation out of these trees, which create more cloud cover, causes more rain, more water for the trees to now drink up, creating more humidity, and it was just this everlasting feedback loop. But we've destroyed that,
Right.
you know, and that's where we're trying to get back to. So we
And
experienced August 8th. For one, it was a storm that way off the coast, but okay, we don't have to worry about it. But then it was just the perfect conditions, the perfect angle to recreate those Kaua winds. And this is a storm that should only be happening every 50 to 100 years, and we're seeing Category 3, Category 4 hurricanes come really close to Hawaii every year now.
it's a frequency thing.
Yes.
This climate change, which some find to be a hoax, but the climate change is real everywhere I've gone on the planet,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen it, and I know what you're talking about. The Hawaii was the most biodiverse place on the planet in the year 1700,
Yeah.
before people came in.
Unfortunately, all of these things have accumulated to create those perfect conditions, and then the fire came. I know that, like, I have so much family and friends who lost their homes. I know people who had lost loved ones. My grandmother, 8 generations were in that home. We also lost that home.
Yeah.
Um, but we saw how the community came together, and it was something to behold. You know,
Right.
it's not something that's very common throughout the world. After a natural disaster, you just see the community come together, and we didn't have any help. That's the reality. We
Yeah.
didn't have help for days after. The roads were cut off, and people had a hard time getting any supplies. And we figured if nobody's gonna come and take care of us, we got to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So, but one thing, the reason our people are that way is because we think the way that we do, because we love the place that we're in.
Yeah.
You know?
Love a place.
So it's more than just everybody was like, wow, it's so amazing to see these people come together after the fire. We should see that more often. Well, the only way you're going to see that more often is if you start
More
acting,
crisis, right?
yeah. But even just on top of like us people coming together, we should see that more often. That's something so beautiful. We should see that more. But that only exists if you live, you think, and you act the way that we do.
Right.
You know, that is starting to disappear because of settler colonialism, because
Sure.
of the urban sprawl, just all of these things happening. And all of these ideologies are now conflicting with how we want to move forward
Right.
in Maui. We don't want to go back to how things were,
Right.
because that's going to put us right back in the wake of a potential fire in the future.
Yeah.
So we are trying to be aware and cognizant of all of our decisions moving forward, how we build back, what we're going to incorporate into this building process so that we don't put ourselves back into this position.
That's great.
And what we have to incorporate is more island mentality, more
Community.
indigenous thought, and more community
Right.
forward policy and movement.
So that's one of the things we do. We go across the planet to see these are common issues, right? Everywhere on the planet.
Yeah.
There's injustice everywhere on the planet. There's these same forces you're talking about: industrialization, commercialization, urbanization, where 80% of us now live in a city and have lost touch with the earth, right? But what you're talking about is the idea of thinking in terms of geologic time. Not in my lifetime or yours. In my lifetime, when I was born, there's 3.4 billion people. Now there's 8 billion. I'm not dead yet. That is a spike that's never happened. And we're not, as a worldwide community, we haven't figured out how to live together or make sure that the bottom parts of our society are eating. you know, the people who don't have opportunity. So, and I think, you know, it happens through crisis, unfortunately, but I completely understand what you're saying. Species, a monarch butterfly is co-evolved with milkweed. That was thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
If you remove the milkweed, you don't have monarch butterflies. And so things like that, which seem to be nothing to people, minor details make a difference. And yeah, you're so I guess I've looked at the plan. They borrowed from the National Disaster Plan a structure,
Mm-hmm.
but the structure is talking about community, historical places, but it's also you've got to have some preventative. So, for instance, the most important is having escape routes for people. People are trapped. How do you get out? Um, Having a little bit more space along the coastline and building the coastline back up, because without the fire, you were losing your coast anyway. Like most islands, most places, Florida, you know, and we're seeing temperature variations. We're seeing things in the ocean that, you know, I've been in Jamaica where I see the coral reef, the staghorn, everything just dying and bleaching, and nobody seems to be aware, because you can still go to Safeway, you can still go to Burger King,
Mm-hmm.
you still have your job, you're watching TV or social media, and so you're not. We lost this connection. So I think that part's fortunate, but here we are 2 years later. I see there's work being done, but there's still displacement. There's probably people who have left, had to leave because they had to survive, right?
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of things that have to be done, different groups, different panels, but you're right. To a degree, anytime we bring people together, there's argument, like,
Yeah.
what should we do? And you have an opinion, this person has an opinion, but I love the idea that you're taking more of a slow approach.
Yeah.
Look, this island took millions of years to form.
Yeah.
You know, and you're not taking the quick approach that you're putting back something together that in 10 or 20 years the same thing happens again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the thinning of the ground cover and of the non-native buffalo grasses, for instance, is going to help. But you know, there's a bunch of different solutions. But I think you're coming from not only that, but you're coming from Mother Earth first and our community first,
Yeah.
which is the way it should be, right?
You know, so when we as Native Hawaiians, we go and advocate for something, or we're trying to fight for something, it is not because we think we're, yes, we do think we're right, because we have 2,000 years of ancestral knowledge that was
Yeah.
passed on to us about the place. But when we go and advocate for something, whatever, say it's a piece of legislation, when that piece of legislation moves forward, I don't see, neither does any of the Native Hawaiians see any reparations or money that come directly from that. We don't see the wealth that comes from it, but the wealth is how that benefits our place. So, but when we go in and advocate for something, what is right for us is something that benefits everybody. It
Right.
benefits community, it benefits place, it doesn't benefit individuals.
Right.
So that's the approach that we're trying to take. And the crazy thing is, after the fire, we were all one family. We all came together because it was survival. Like it had to happen.
Right.
But when things started to get back to normalcy, is when we started to see the confrontations and the problems really start to come out.
Right.
So, was the status quo and normalcy the way to go? Do we really want to get back to that? Because it only led us to more fighting and more arguing and
Sure.
less movement forward. So maybe we need to switch our way of thinking, and it can never look like how it's going to look on that day, because we saw what happened after, when we had nothing. We had none of our Western luxuries that we see every single day. We didn't have our phone, internet service. Our cars couldn't really drive because we didn't have gas, anything, food.
Right.
All of this stuff was missing, but we had each other, and that was enough to get us through those hard times. But now, we've moved away from each other, and we're going back to our Western luxuries of, oh, we need this and we need that. And
You've been
there's
you've been
confrontations.
separated and pulled apart too, because
Yeah.
there's no place to live. There's no
Yeah.
place to work. There's nothing that you're part of. So,
Yeah,
so right now the solution, you've got Lahaina Strong is the organization
Yeah.
that you're with, And the idea is that you, as a group of people, are heavily advocating for your way of life, for your people, and for this environment. Um, and so
And
there is a battle. There
yeah,
will be a battle, right?
and like I said, we take a holistic approach. It's never like we're gonna take it all and leave you guys high and dry. No, we're trying to find solutions that work for everybody.
Hmm.
And our capitalistic way that we move these days, it's destructive. It's extractive. It never regenerates or gives back to the place that it's taken from.
Right.
But if we take the time to slow down and figure out how we can make these both align together, then why not? And that's very much so where I'm trying to come from in this. And yes, there are things out there that I believe shouldn't even exist. But as we're moving forward, we're trying to incorporate not just our own community, but how we can make these things fit together. And
Sure.
it's all possible. It's all possible.
So it goes to
And
the age-old problem of governing the common.
yes,
Governing common, we all have the same air, same water, same land. How do we govern that so that one group doesn't have control over another, or that the environment is at risk because everybody is greedy or looking for something, right? And you're talking a systems approach, holistic thinking, a circular,
yeah,
regenerative society here. And it's not an easy thing to pull off, but it's, I think, should be the goal for what you're doing, and it sounds like it is. So
we have to, or we're gonna disappear forever.
right.
You know,
Well,
people come here and love Hawaii. Yes, it's a beautiful place. The ocean is beautiful. The sand is nice. The water's warm. The climate is most ideal. But there are places like this across the entire planet.
yes, I've
What
been
is
to
the
many
difference?
islands everywhere.
What is the difference? Why is it that when people come here, they automatically feel like they're at home? And it's because of the people.
People are tied to place.
Yes.
That's the bottom line.
And unfortunately, a lot of our people are having to leave. Things were already expensive before the fire. We have the highest housing prices, cost of living in America.
Yeah.
And
And you need
it's-
workers to do
yeah,
work.
we
They
need-
can't afford to. They can't afford $1 million home
Yeah.
if they're
But
the ones doing the work.
We also need what creates and gives this place its authenticity and its aloha that everybody loves so much. It doesn't exist if our people are not here.
Yeah, if it's paved over, if everything looks like a parking lot, then that's
Yeah.
what it is. Right?
And
So
you know, there's so many issues and problems that are prevalent now, especially because of the climate crisis and sea level rise and all of these things, and it is
Right.
making it exponentially harder for our people to go back home. Currently, yes, there is some construction taking place, but very few of those sites and homes are people who are born and raised in Hawaii.
Right.
It's people who have resources and could get this stuff done. But when it comes to, say, a lot of my family and friends and people that I'm close with, who are born and raised here, they're having a hard time.
do you see there being a general despair and a kind of an anger? Obviously, there was a shock, and it seems to me as I walk those streets, I'd still be in shock. So why wouldn't anyone be in shock? Because it's like you said, it's 10 generations like evaporated, and it was, the fires lasted almost 3 weeks though, right? There were 3 or 4 different fires, but the first day was devastating.
Yeah, it lasted. I mean, once it burned through Lahaina, it was a fire that we really didn't care about anymore because there's nothing else to burn.
I
So
see.
it was only burning a little bit further up in the mountains, and they put that out eventually. And then the reason it seemed like it took so long for them to be 100% contained and put out is because, you know, there were hot spots here and there that
Right.
they can't call it
A fire.
out
Yeah.
unless they go and make sure all of the embers, everything that's in the ground that
Sure.
might still be hot. So the harsh reality is it's a very difficult and hard time right now for our
Yeah.
people when it comes to finances, just all kinds of injustices
Everything.
going on around what's happening to this town. And then on top of it all, we don't want to romanticize the fire anymore, but
Right.
it's important to keep that at the forefront. But at the same time, we want to move forward and see what we can get.
And you know what it seems to me? We watch television. That's how we see the world, maybe, or social media. And we'll see an earthquake in one part of the world. We just saw in Jamaica the biggest storm ever, a class 5 ever. And and I'm going to go over there and podcast, but you can't even get in. The main road is down. And what it seems to me is like, it's great television for a week or two, and then it's over, and it's like, hey, wait a second, the world has forgotten me.
Yeah.
You know. But now we're seeing that everywhere. I guess if we're living if it's not affecting us personally, we have this mentality of apathy, or we don't care. So I think that's a big part of what you guys have to do, is keep this thing fresh and alive and keep it moving. Are you optimistic that you can have a better Lahaina?
Yes, 100%. Where
Good.
we've made sure that we've built enough people power, we've educated as many people as we could. We always take the chance to, if there's something coming up, we take the time to educate people on the issue, the subject, and then we call them to action, have them move forward, and our community shows up. And that's one of the reasons I'm so proud to be from this place is you never really see 1,000 people show up to give testimony at a county council building, or so I'm very optimistic of the potential. It's just going to come down to if we can continuously maintain this for the long run.
I've got questions that come to me immediately because I work with soil all the time, but I'm thinking, in a house, the house might have been built 100 years ago with asbestos. It has metal products, heavy metals. It has plastics. It has fuels, energies. It has shag carpeting, and it has lots and lots of toxicity. Right? It burns up, immediately goes into our atmosphere. Okay, nothing you can do there. But now, it all has to go somewhere. It goes to the soil, and then it rains, and then it goes from the soil to the water. I think they've done a pretty good job of cleanup, but is that still being tested? And that's because you don't want to move back into a toxic dump site either, right?
Yeah. So after the fire, that was one of the biggest issues and subjects, is where we're going to put our debris. So there were multiple options. Something that was a very controversial issue was the placement of the temporary dump site.
Landfill of some sort, yeah.
Until we figure out a permanent location, but the temporary location needed to be closer to Lahaina for
logistics.
Yeah, logistics, but also if we consolidate everything into one area, it's easier to manage the runoff and the externalities of all of this debris if it's in one spot, as opposed to the entire town. And at this time, the rain started to come heavy. We had a lot of rain, a lot of runoff and stuff like that. So
the problem just gets bigger and bigger.
Exactly. But the location of where it was going was also a controversial issue, because one of the most important reefs in the planet is right there next to it in the ocean.
Yeah.
So how were we supposed to weigh this out, And it came down to what the biggest need was. If our people want to get home, we need to clean this up so that we can manage the area, that we're not getting as much runoff as possible, the least amount of runoff as possible, and getting it into this place that we know is not going to leak all of these
toxicity
and toxic waste into the ocean. So our mayor did a pretty good job in the very beginning. We did kind of call him out on that because they just named this site without the input of the community, but we pushed very hard to make sure that it remained a temporary location. And I believe about a week ago, I think they're still doing some hauling, but the vast majority, I think like 80 or 90% of the debris from the temporary location has now been transported to its permanent site. Okay. So it's no longer there.
A danger.
It's not this, weight above our head that might just drop on us.
So if you had, and you and I will continue this, and any other people that you think that should chime in, but if you, right now we have, potential of 1 million different people that may view this, right, over time. What would you say to people from the outside if you had two things to say, or if you had to ask for some kind of help, or at least some kind of empathy, what would you say?
I would say it's super important that you are in touch with your place, that you build a community that you know you can rely on, because when it comes to it, we point our fingers at the people at the top all
Right.
the time, but then we forget we put them there.
Right.
So who really has the authority? We do.
Yeah.
Community does. The people do. And the sooner we realize this, the sooner we can start making those changes that we want to see. For example, like one thing that I always use as a example is gold. Gold has no value. Actually, I mean, it has value to us, but it has no.
It's nothing but a rock, right?
It's nothing
Piece
but
of metal.
It's no different
It's
than
metal.
lead or another piece of metal. But because it's shiny and we believe it to be
Value.
valuable, is the reason it is valuable. So if we continue to believe that this is just the way it is, and the people at the top are the ones that we got to tell they need to make the change, and we continue to believe that, we're giving them more power than they deserve.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
they only deserve this power if we, the people, give them that power.
Right.
So once we start realizing that, that's when we, as the people, the working class citizens, the vast majority of the place, can start to make the changes that we want to see. We got to speak up. We have to learn. We have to be in touch with our environment, because at the end of the day, for example, if us in Hawaii, we lose, say we have a massive shortage of oil and fuel. We can't get ships here. We can't get planes here. Hawaii imports 80 to 90% of its food.
Wow.
Right? If we lose the ships and we lose all contact with the outside world, we have enough food here to support us for about 4 days.
Wow.
Right? So it's important for us to be resilient.
And
In
grow
order
your
to
own
be
food.
resilient, we need to learn about the place, how
Yeah,
we can
yeah.
produce our own, how we can.
And you've
because-
got some beautiful lands. They just have to be
Yeah.
treated with the type of agriculture
Yeah.
that's
And
climate smart, right?
Hawaiians were one of 5 cultures or indigenous peoples across the planet who took the ability and capability of nature on its own and took it to a higher extent than nature could even take it to. And Hawaii is one of 5 indigenous cultures on the planet that could do that
Right.
without destroying the environment. They only supplemented the environment and started to make it flourish further than it ever could.
So now,
So-
as a group, it's about capacity building as well,
Yeah.
because your generation or the generation before you has been part of this industrial generation, and so it's relearning some of the older techniques, and it's really contemplating that better world. So
Yeah, and they can coexist. You know, that's where we got to realize, like,
Of course.
it's not one or the other.
right,
You know,
right.
I can,
It has to coexist,
It has
or we don't sustain.
and it can.
Right.
Why we should be utilizing our technologies and the way this industrialization to help mend and create a better, like, we can't eat off of this cement here, you know. So are we really, for our convenience, we're gonna cement everything over? It doesn't make sense.
Right. Right.
So,
right.
if I could give a message to the world, it would be to get more connected. We're so disconnected from everything.
Right.
Most of us don't even know where our food comes from, stuff like that. And that would start to give you a better understanding of the place and the people of that place. Then you build that community. Now you have this force that can be there to be there with you and for you if the time ever comes.
And if people, what they really have to do is take note. If it could happen here, it could happen wherever they are. And it's not an if, it's a when, because we're seeing much more of this going on. So, well, I appreciate you being here today to meet me, and we'll definitely get on a Zoom whenever you have time with
Yes.
other people that you want to add to the message. And I'll give you my information. We'll put all your Lahaina Strong information on this and anything else, donation pages or anything, because there's people like me who have visited. I was here before you were here, you know, years ago, and I remember Lahaina. You know, at that time I wasn't thinking maybe holistically about everything in the world, although I got my degree 40 years ago in environmental science, so I was lended to think that way, but a lot has happened in these 40 years that I see like severe problems that have to be solved now. But I do appreciate you being here today, and
Yes.
I
Thank
look
you.
forward to seeing you on a Zoom coming up soon.
Appreciate the opportunity.
All right.
Look forward to our next.
All right.
next
Yeah,
top
we'll
story.
get something out that people can see. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.